Good morning, everyone, and many thanks to all of you for taking the time to join us today. My name is Joe Kennedy. I'm a congressman from Massachusetts. I'm thrilled to be here with all of you. And as one of many Kennedys in the room, I'm going to take a quick moment. It will be quick, I promise. I recognize a couple of others. But Dave McCain in the back, rather than sitting in the back, he is sitting in the back. Yes, he's a cousin, so hi, thanks for all the Kathleen Townsend up front as well. Obviously, characters here. I don't know if there's anybody else I missed. If there is, blame it on the head and bad eyes and not the heart. You are all welcome. To all of the RFK Human Rights Board members that are here today, Richard, Melissa, Dale, and James, Donato, folks coming from all walks of life, your experiences, your expertise inform our mission. And we wouldn't be able to reach the countless lives that we can, that you all can, without your blessing. So thank you for sharing your valuable time with an organization so close to all of our hearts. To the Human Rights Board judges, Reverend William Schultz, Maria Osa, Luisa Malago, members of the diplomatic community, including colleagues of mine from Congress, I'm here as well. It's an extraordinary honor for me to be able to stand in the same room with so many human rights champions who have created generational change in neighborhoods around the world, many of which most of us here will never know. Every year at Thanksgiving, our entire family gathers around after dessert. It's about 60 of us, for those of you counting, for those of you making the trip up. And we all battle my Aunt Carrie over who can take the wishbone from the turkey. Whoever ends up with that longer piece gets to introduce the next year's Human Rights Award winner. We've been working on it, and every single day since last year, and hopefully I'm not going to lose my sixth in a row. So folks, let me just say, to Alfredo, it is deeply humbling to be with you today. Your steady, fearless pursuit of justice for political prisoners and victims of human rights abuses sends a message to us all and every corner of the world. Thank you for risking your own safety, your security, to stand for peace, and to bring that message to families of countless Venezuelans and many others around the world. Folks, it is no secret that we gather today amongst turbulent times. The President of the United States was in Asia this past week. Didn't even mention human rights abuses in Burma or the Philippines. A foreign adversary that is knee-deep in the democracy. A Justice Department that is backing away from civil rights protections by the day. A budget, tax reform plan, a health care bill that will bring the sick and the struggling and the suffering to their knees. Immigration and refugee policies that are leaving devastated families and communities in their wake. A worldview that threatens values our country stands for, and one that stands in stark contrast to the flags behind it. The brave comadres who advocate for the disappeared and assassinated, to Andrea James and Glenn Martin, dedicated themselves to criminal justice reform. These flags represent the better angels who will always guide us toward a kinder, gentler world. Whenever dark clouds of division and despair surround us, we all can find hope in those who have been honored by the organization over the past decades. And with that, I'd like to introduce somebody who herself has been the voice to the voiceless for over 30 years, and Maria Munoz. As the founder of the Futuro Media Group and the anchor for Latino USA, Maria tells stories that are far too often never heard, and in doing so, helps us realize and recognize the connections that are shared across humanity and around the world. Please join me in welcoming Maria.
serious moment here, but can you see me? I'm a chaparra. That's Mexican Spanish for shorty. I'd like to add a little bit of levity because otherwise, if we didn't laugh a little bit, we would cry. And actually, I think our honoree today symbolizes how important it is to actually find spirit. We did an interview with Alfredo for Latino USA just a couple of days ago, and the way we ended the interview, which was really tough, was with Alfredo singing. Because he is not only a human rights defender and a father and a husband and a citizen of Venezuela and the world, he's a musician. And so, gracias por tu voz, de la cantada. I'm going to provide just a few remarks before we begin. It's truly my honor, and still a kind of a little bit of a pinch me moment that I'm here, being introduced by somebody, a member of the Kennedy family. My mom is in Mexico, and she's been texting me like, "What's going on? What's going on?" I am one of those incredibly lucky human beings who twice has received a phone call from F Kennedy when she has recognized the work that we've done in my journalism. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that because I think it's important to make the connections with what we're living here and what the work that Alfredo is doing in Venezuela. So the award that we got most recently was for a two-part documentary on Latino USA called The Strange Death of Jose de Jesus. And it looked at the story of one Mexican immigrant who handed himself over to the Border Patrol because he was afraid. And he was put on suicide watch. And he proceeded to commit suicide while he was on suicide watch by swallowing his sock, forcing it down his throat until it suffocated. It's a horror that is happening in our country today. What we uncovered is that in private immigrant detention centers or detention camps, there are no standards for treatment of the mentally ill or for suicide prevention. In many ways, this was just another Mexican, another immigrant, another Latino man, another illegal death. He wasn't one of us. Why should it matter? The Roberth F Kennedy Awards is essential in our America today because more than ever, you shine light and give recognition precisely to the human beings and to the stories that we knew that Bobby Kennedy had been at the side of Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta. We felt it. This little Mexican immigrant kid on the south side of Chicago. This great American, Roberth F. Kennedy, saw himself in the people most unlike him, farm workers. Our history as Latinos in this country is tied to yours, of course. And that's why it's important that we're recognizing Alfredo today. You are choosing to see a man from a part of this world which is forgotten. Our querida Latinoamérica. Gracias to the Roberth F. Kennedy Human Rights Award for not forgetting Latinoamérica. Because we are in fact a part of you. In fact, the South has much to teach us. We have to learn from Alfredo. Because right now, today, we need Alfredos in this country too. When I interviewed Alfredo, he said, all of us across the world have to step up every day to fight for human rights. And the truth is that the example with this award today is showing to all of us in this country que cada uno tenemos que hacer lo mismo. That in this country, we too have to do the same. You are a role model for us. So while now, immigrants, Latinos, are seen as takers, what we actually are is we are bringing things to this society. And you are recognizing what Alfredo is bringing, not just to this society, but to the world and to our country with this award. Alfredo is a symbol of the social skills that Latinos, immigrants, bring and carry with us. All of you are going to go watch this amazing movie, Coco, about the Day of the Dead. Now it's all across the United States that we are going to recognize el Día de los Muertos. But Alfredo is saying to us, every day, como en Venezuela, como en Latinoamérica, is a day to fight for human rights. Muchas gracias, Alfredo, por todo lo que has hecho por la humanidad. To introduce the Honorable Luis Amado from the Organization of American States to introduce our honoree.
Friends, members of Congress, members of the diplomatic community, it is a real pleasure to be here with you today to celebrate Alfredo Romero, a man to whom I hold the greatest respect. Today's hours is inspired by ideas stemming from some of the worst polarizations. In one decade, too many visionaries, John Fisher Kennedy, Roberth Kennedy, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, were violently taken from this world. Far too soon. What they left behind were ideas and principles that are now immortalized in ideas societies. During his 1966 trip to apartheid era South Africa, Robert Kennedy spoke for a time in the Ripple of Hope. The idea that the action of one man willing to stand up for an idea or strike out against injustice can bring down the strongest walls of oppression. Alfredo Romero is the embodiment of the power of one individual to effect change. And this in a country where the government has completely forsaken the people, dismantling, as I said, all semblance of democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. Life, liberty, and security of the person are among our fundamental rights, freedom for all individuals and equality. Since Nicolás Maduro took power in Venezuela, close to 12,000 Venezuelan citizens have been detained or imprisoned for criticizing the government. 7,069 detained under precautionary measures, and more than 700 civilians tried under military justice. Individuals are held in secret detentions with inadequate conditions, facing unfair trials. They are abused, tortured, impunity. More than 1,272 Venezuelans have been imprisoned for their ideas, for their dreams of the democratic Venezuela. As of November 13, there were still 342 political prisoners behind bars. This number ebbs and flows. When one is released, another is taken. It is impossible to celebrate the release of an individual without wondering who has been detained instead. Venezuelan authorities arbitrarily arrest and imprison whomever they choose, whenever they choose, and releasing them if they choose. Freedom and security of the person are not longer guaranteed rights, but a luxury that can only be purchased through blind loyalty to a corrupt regime. When the government in Venezuela began to lose the confidence of its people, they responded with force. Since the people are a threat to their power and continuity, they made their people the enemy. Literally, Maduro and his regime designed and implemented the so-called Plan Zamora, turning the country into a military operation theater. Any person in opposition to or critical of the regime is branded an enemy of the state. The orders are to do the greatest possible harm. The institutions, built to protect the people, have been corrupt or replaced. They instead are purveyors of violence against citizens. The criminal justice system has been transformed into a tool of the narco elite in power. Kennedy spoke of institutional violence, for the decay and inaction of governmental body violence against their citizens. Foro Penal Venezolano was created for this exact purpose, to defend the right of the citizens against a government who has institutionalized violence against its people. In Venezuela, it is only through the courage and conviction of private citizens, like Alfredo, that the rights of the people are defended. Following his example, Foro Penal has grown to more than 200 lawyers and 1,700 volunteers across the country. Their work is essential and the need still grows. In the past 3 years alone, Foro Penal has aided close to 10,000 victims of Nicolás Maduro. Private citizens are now the voice of justice. While I preparing these remarks, I was reminded of Uruguay on the moment in 1973 when the military dictators abolished power. Wilson Ferreira, the leader of the National Party, said in a memorable speech in the Congress, "It is said that tyrants and their accomplices will be judged by history, and this is true. However, before that, these people, will make them accountable and responsible for their actions." We in the international community have a responsibility. We cannot accept impunity for these crimes. This is not a political issue. There is no gray area when it comes to basic human rights. As we work towards a solution to the crisis, we must be clear. We will not compromise the rights of citizens. Political prisoners are not negotiable. The only Venezuela that people accept is one that respects democracy and human rights, where all political prisoners are released and the rule of law has been restored. The path of corruption and violence must be left behind and respect for its citizens restored. Alfredo, thank you. You are an example of commitment to democratic values combined with practical results in helping those without a voice. Your personal story inspires all of us. Thank you very much.
From the White House. President Trump talked about torture in his campaign. He said that it works and people who get tortured deserve it anyway. And he said that under his presidency, he planned to bring back waterboarding and allow worse. He's cozied up to autocrats from Saudi Arabia to the Philippines to Russia to Nigeria and beyond. He's increased military spending while cutting funds from the United Nations and UN peacekeeping forces. He's filled the cabinet with human rights offenders from the Department of Justice, as we all know, to Rex Tillerson, who has gone around the world saying that human rights are no longer a priority in U.S. foreign policy, to Mike Pompeo at the CIA, who said to people in the Senate torture report that they are non-torturers but patriots. His first act as president was to take away reproductive rights from women, and his second act was, as we all know, the Muslim ban. He's attacked Muslims, women, LGBT people, Mexicans, Native Americans, people with disabilities, more recently Puerto Ricans. So this is a time, really, for all of us to look to human rights defenders like Alfredo Romero, who face imprisonment and torture and death with dignity and love of country and a determination to create change. And we are so proud and so lucky to have you here today. Thank you. We're here in the Kennedy Caucus Room, and this is where on January 2nd, 1960, and 8 years later on March 16th, 1968, first Uncle Jack and then Daddy used the same words. I'm announcing today my candidacy for presidency of the United States. Daddy's words that day echo across 5 decades, and I'd like to read to you a little bit of his speech 50 years ago. He said, "I do not run for the presidency merely to oppose any man, but to propose new policies. I run because I am convinced that this country is on a perilous course, and because I have such strong feelings about what must be done, and I feel that I'm obliged to do all that I can. I run to seek new policies to end bloodshed in Vietnam, in our cities, policies to close the gaps that now exist between black and white, rich and poor, young and old, in this country and around the world. I run for the presidency because I want the Democratic Party in the United States of America to stand for hope instead of despair, for reconciliation of men instead of the growing risk of world war. I run because it is now unmistakably clear that we can change these disastrous, divisive policies only by changing the men who are now making them. How about that? 50 years later, we can all agree that we can change the current crop of disastrous, divisive policies only by making those policy decisions, but we are not in a presidential campaign. So today, it's up to us. It's up to each one of us to change a small portion of events and send forth our own ripples of hope. 250 years ago, the great Venezuelan patriot Francisco de Miranda fought side by side with our forefathers and our foremothers for independence. 55 years ago, President Kennedy set out to fundamentally transform U.S. policy towards Latin America, away from bolstering U.S. multinationals, enriching oligarchs, spending 90% of foreign aid on militaries, participating in mischievous CIA schemes to overthrow freely elected governments, maintaining repressive power structures, and undermining democracy. Instead, he sought new goals that aligned the United States with the people who shared our values and should have been our most ardent supporters: students, academics, trade unionists, progressive Catholics, and lovers of justice and freedom. As President Kennedy put it, we propose to complete the revolution of the Americas, to build a hemisphere where all men can hope for a suitable standard of living and all can live out their lives in dignity and in freedom. Let us awaken our American Revolution, not with an imperialism of force or fear, but the rule of courage and freedom and the hope of the future of mankind. Soon thereafter, Jack welcomed the great Venezuelan Democratic leader Roberth F to the White House, saying, "You represent all that we admire in a political leader." Betancourt's fight for democracy, President Kennedy said, made him a symbol of what we wish for our own country and for our sister republics. Soon after, Uncle Jack and Daddy visited Caracas, where each received a hero's welcome. I fondly remember visiting the Robert F. Kennedy School in the Robert F. Kennedy neighborhood of Caracas a few years ago, along with my mother. After President Kennedy died, Lyndon Johnson installed hatchet men Jack Vaughn and Thomas Mann at the State Department, who systematically dismantled all that Jack and Daddy had created in our relations with Latin America. At Senate hearings on CIA intervention, which led to the overthrow of popularly elected leaders in the Dominican Republic and Brazil, Daddy questioned Vaughn, saying about the new LBJ policy, "Well, Mr. Vaughn, let me get this straight. You're saying what the Alliance for Progress has come down to is that if you have a military takeover, outlaw political parties, close down the Congress, put your political opponents in jail, and take away the basic freedoms of the people, you can get all the American aid you want. But if you mess around with an American oil company, we'll cut you off without a penny." Is that right? Is that what the Alliance for Progress now comes down to? And Vaughn answered under oath, "That's about the size of it." Today, both our countries reap the whirlwind of abandoning the idealistic vision of the Alliance for Progress and the heroic figures who championed a free and democratic future. Venezuela endures under an autocratic government that denies 31 million Venezuelans the right to dignity and basic freedoms. The government has jailed political opponents, people like Leopoldo Lopez, and repressed civic space in all its expressions, while strong-arming the judicial functions of the state behind a greater accumulation of executive power. It is a place where the military now controls government functions like agriculture and labor, and where humanitarian aid that could help millions of hungry Venezuelans is denied as an insult to the regime's pride. Under the current regime, the only reliable thing about elections is that they'll be postponed or canceled on a whim, and the power to right wrongs is stripped from the National Assembly and concentrated in a few hands. Everything possible is being done to strangle Venezuela's right spirit of vigorous and open democracy. All this goes on while the ruling power fails to engage on crucial issues like the crumbling economy, endemic violence, and an increase in narco trafficking. All efforts, it seems, are focused on limiting the basic freedoms of Venezuelans. Meanwhile, the Venezuelan people are systemically denied basic rights like access to medical care or food security, and those who speak up are likely to end up in jail. In just 4 months this year, over 5,000 people were arbitrarily arrested for peaceful protest. Over 439 people remain in the legal limbo of detention, where they face torture, sleep and food deprivation, sexual assault, and a raft of other human rights abuses. These 439 prisoners in Venezuela are prisoners of conscience, journalists, political opponents, writers, and artists. It is in this context that Alfredo Romero and his organization, Foro Penal take on the forces of repression. Alfredo has devoted his life to defending people from arbitrary detention, political persecution, and inhumane treatment during detention. This work has become even more relevant under the current political, economic, and human rights crisis in Venezuela. When Alfredo joined Foro Penal Venezolano a dozen years ago, he had no idea their work would result in liberating over 10,000 Venezuelans from the jaws and abuse of government. 10,000 people of this matter. Despite risks of imprisonment, torture, and death, Foro Penal's 160 lawyers and 4,060 volunteers, how about that? That's pretty amazing too. Risk their lives to challenge a Kafka-esque system of secret jails, shifting court dates, and hidden charges. To combat a system that works in secrecy, and where there is no independent judiciary to safeguard the rule of law, in addition to using the legal avenues available, Alfredo and his team use cell phones to document every second of contact with police officials, every moment spent sitting in a jail cell waiting room, every transfer of a prisoner, every dirty trick played by corrupt enablers of autocracy. By making sure they don't lose track of any person who's been arbitrarily detained by state agents, Foro Penal leaves no opportunity for the state to forcibly discipline its clients. Further, by documenting and reporting government abuses in real time, Foro Penal increases the political cost of the state's repressive actions. So much of Alfredo's approach depends on the flow of data, using cell phones as geolocators to find where monthly reports issued by Alfredo and his team have become the main and most respected source of information on the current crisis in Venezuela. That Foro Penal does this incredible work on a shoestring budget in the midst of an unprecedented civil crisis speaks to the overwhelming courage and moral purpose of Alfredo Romero. Alfredo Romero truly does have a surplus of courage, a true courage that inspires those around him to help protect Venezuelans from disappearing into the procedural abyss of a police state. Alfredo possesses the kind of organizing courage my father believed would lead us to a more just and peaceful world. My father didn't believe it was enough to believe the right thing. You have to do the right thing. Bobby Kennedy's legacy provides the roadmap for Robert F. Kennedy human rights as we work with Alfredo and our other defenders of human rights to make gentle the life of the world. That roadmap traces the long journey of Alfredo Romero and his colleagues as they seek a better world. It marks prisons where they freed the innocent and families made whole through their work, and it traces the miles still to go towards stability and peace in the lives of Venezuelans. Alfredo, you are a hero, and we are so proud today to present you with the Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights Award.
Well, thank you so much for this award to Kerry Kennedy, President of Roberth F Kennedy Human Rights, members of the Kennedy family present here today, the members of the Board of Directors of Roberth F Kennedy Human Rights, Secretary General Luis Almagro, our distinguished Master of Ceremonies, journalist Maria Hinojosa, Congressman Joseph Kennedy III and his Davy Hoyer, representatives of the diplomatic community and civil society, mis hermanos venezolanos, aquí presentes, my fellow Venezuelans here and those that are watching us through Periscope, ladies and gentlemen. People say that speeches in English often start with a joke. But however, this one I will start it with a story that at least make one person smile. Ephraim is one of almost 12,000 political former president detainees arrested in Venezuela since 2014. He became a political prisoner without committing a crime, just because he thought differently. Ephraim was tortured. He was subjected to electric shocks and beaten. He said his jailers tied his hands behind his back and suspended him by a rope attached to his wrist. They dislocated his shoulders. For 2 months, he was kept in an overcrowded cell with no room to lie down. He was only able to stand up and kneel down. That caused, of course, multiple blood clots in his right leg. He caught hepatitis A and B. After more than 3 years in jail, his health condition deteriorated to the point that he was dying. The first time I visited Ephraim at the prison center about 1 hour from Caracas was on September 29, 2016. Ephraim smiled when he looked at me getting into that place. He hugged me, even though it was the first time that I had met him. We talked for about 20 minutes. I worked every day with Mariana, his sister, and his lawyer for Ephraim's freedom. We developed social media campaigns file petitions before the international entities, and so on. One day, I received a phone call from Mrs. F Kennedy. I'm from Roberth F Kennedy. I was surprised and honored when I was told that I would be the 2017 recipient of the Roberth F Kennedy Memorial Award. I met Carrie in New York. Later on, I told her about it. Carrie introduced me to the Nobel Peace Prize winner, Mohammad Yunus. And he took a picture showing a real notice requesting Ephraim's release. After a week, on October 6, 2017, Ephraim was released. He was incarcerated for 3 years, 2 months, 12 days, and 19 hours. He always repeats those numbers. Ephraim is physically free, but when you see his face without expression, you realize that his mind and spirit are still in prison. I have been asking him to smile, to welcome freedom, to smile to freedom. Today, Ephraim is in Venezuela. I'm sure he will smile when he watches this. I'm sure he considers this moment a great moment of hope. A moment, I'm sorry. This is a moment of hope for more than 300 political prisoners still in jail. Former political prisoners, veterans, might also be listening to us. Here, Sister Munira is here with us. Lisbeth, or Mama Liz, as in-prison students used to call her, was incarcerated in the same place where she used to visit as a human rights activist, actually a volunteer of Foro Penal. She used to bring medicines, food and water to these young political prisoners. 2 months ago, she was released after 4 months in jail. Jose Luis, Melanie, Vasco, Cesar, Carlos, Aidan, and many others may also be watching this event. They all are just a few of the almost 12,000 political detainees that have been incarcerated since 2014 in Venezuela. Because of what I have called the revolving door effect, while some political detainees are released, others are incarcerated. Right now, there are 53 political prisoners. Actually, 342 political prisoners, because they have been there released. They are held in dark cells, and they are not able to watch or listen to us today. But their mothers and fathers, wives and husbands, sons and daughters are watching this event. For example, Claire, they call it in Spanish, is the mother of Carlos Julio Velasco, an 18-year-old student. He was arrested in a protest this year. He too is very sick and requires an immediate surgical procedure. Claire only see and hug her son when his jailers allow him. But there are other parents who might also be watching this event right now, but who will never see their sons and daughters anymore. These boys and girls were killed in protests. Ivan is the father of Fabiano Villa. a 17-year-old student who was shot and killed in a protest in Caracas. He's one of over 100 killed this year in political demonstrations. All of them are part of our Foro Penal family. A big family of more than 4,000 people that's still growing every day. It's a shame, really, that we're growing every day. We're happy about it because we have more volunteers. But at the same time, it's a shame. Besides lawyers and volunteers, many of our members are these former victims or their families. So you can see Julio Cesar, for example, the brother of Julio, working as a volunteer, not only for the release of his brother, he worked as a volunteer for the release of his vet, but also other prisoners. Mariana, Efrain's sister, is her brother's lawyer, but also represents Caro Julio. Efrain himself meets with families of political prisoners to bring them home. I must share, of course, then this award with my big family of Foro Penal. This is a recognition for all of you. To Mariela, Romero, Alonso, and particularly to Gonzalo Piñón. Besides being a member of the board of directors of Foro Penal, he's my brother, my friend, my compadre. We work pro bono based upon our principles, what we call the 4 C's, in reference to the letters that the following 4 words in Spanish begin with: constancia, compromiso, convicción, y corazón. Constancia means perseverance. Compromiso means commitment. Convicción means conviction. And corazón means heart. This is the most important one, the last one. But it's not just romantic. We believe that when you do good for others, that same goodness comes back to you. We believe that to be human rights activists is not a sacrifice, actually. This work brings great satisfaction. The best of all is what we call the smile of freedom. Yes, for example, the smile of Efrain or his bed as they walked out of prison some days ago. That smile is energy, it's motivation for me. Roberth F Kennedy said that cruelty is contagious, and its disease knows no bounds of race or nation. That's true, but he also works to fight for it, against it. That is why good people have to work together. We are called to make compassion and goodness a contagious joy for most of the people in the world. Those good ones will join the fight against that cruel disease that RFK spoke of. I have to admit that sometimes I got tired. I have to admit that sometimes I thought of giving up. But then I talked to a mother of political prisoners like Claire, the mother of Caro Julio, and I feel the need to help them. I realized that I'm addicted to helping people. I'm addicted to the smile of freedom. I'm addicted to justice. And that is also contagious. Therefore, I'm committed to incorporate more and more people to the addiction of helping people and conquering freedom and justice. You may ask, why did I become a human rights defender? Well, actually, I didn't plan it. No, I didn't imagine. 15 years ago, I decided to help the family of an 18-year-old boy that was shot in the head and killed in a mass protest. But later on, a second family asked for help. Then the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth. And now I've been involved in more than 9,000 cases, almost 10,000 cases, helping victims of repression. Freedom, then, is a daily work. And it cannot be taken for granted, even in countries identified as free countries. You can have freedom today and lose it tomorrow. That happened to us in Venezuela. As I said, I received great satisfaction, and the greatest one is my family. My natural father. My wife, Luisa, who is here today along with my sons, Alfredo and Francisco. I have to thank them for accompanying me in this quest for freedom and justice. Today, to them, I dedicate this song to my sisters. In 2003, I composed a song which has become the anthem of my NGO, Foro Penal. In a matter of words, it says that, something like that freedom is daily work, and that it takes a lifetime to fight for freedom in one's country. Of course, in my case, Venezuela. And he says something like that. Roberth says it. Cuesta toda la vida, una Venezuela nuestra, un pueblo libre hermano, que respire grandeza. Cuesta toda la vida, una Venezuela nuestra, el cielo azul de diciembre, una sonrisa de mi gente. Cuesta toda la vida, cuesta toda la vida, cuesta toda la vida. Vivir en libertad por una Venezuela nuestra, Venezuela nuestra, Venezuela nuestra, en libertad, en libertad. Thank you.
Alfredo is that it's not about the politics, it's actually about what's just. It's actually about not his brain that actually brought him here to Georgetown to get a degree and then to become a corporate lawyer and a banker. It's not that brain. It's actually Alfredo's heart and that capacity to hope and make all of us leave today con esa sonrisa, with that smile of, in my view, democracy. To everyone of Foro Penal Venezolano and everybody who's watching in Venezuela, have an amazing day, and remember, every day we are all defenders of human rights. Thank you to the Roberth F Kennedy.